Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Good morning, afternoon, evening, depending on where you are. I'm Maria Volpe. I'm a professor at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, where I also teach the dispute resolution courses and run the dispute resolution program. This monthly breakfast is co-sponsored by the Association for Conflict Resolution of Greater New York, ACRGNY, and the City University of New York Dispute Resolution Center at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. I started these breakfasts after 9/11. So this morning is number 252. We have been getting up that many mornings, to be here at 8 in the morning. Since COVID, March 2020, we've been hosting these breakfasts online. Prior to that, we always met in person. So the time frame from 8 to 8:30 is an informal networking opportunity. We used to do it over bagel and coffee. Now we try to replicate some form of talking to each other about whatever. Each month, these breakfasts are organized and convened by a terrific group of colleagues that I'm so happy to work with: Julie Denny, Matthew Latimer, Nikki Borofsky, and Emily Skinner. We have been talking about whether to continue these breakfasts online or whether we will resume the in-person. For the immediate future, we will continue this online format. At some point, we may attempt a hybrid so that we would have the in-person plus the online modality available. We'll let you know how that works. We're going to experiment it on campus first. And today we are so delighted to have with us Tricia Jones. We were just talking before we got started here how long it's been that we've known each other. It seems as though some of us have been in the field for a very long time, but it is such a pleasure, Trish, to have you join us here. Trish has been a trailblazer in developing a wide range of initiatives in this field, and she'll be talking about some of her work. And to introduce her, I'm going to turn it over to Julie, who has the honors of introducing our wonderful speaker. Thanks, Trish, for joining us this morning. Right. Julie.
Trish has a title that goes on for pages. I asked her earlier this morning what if people at a cocktail party asked her what she did, she would say she lived in conflict. Anyway, she is, and I have to take a deep breath, professor and director of the Center for Conflict Management and Media Impact in the Department of Communication and Social Influence at Klein College of Mediation and Communication at Temple University. She said she was going to found a group of dispute resolvers called Trench Babies, and we were all going to go on a cruise together. Trish teaches PhD candidates at Temple in several of their programs. She's authored 8 books. She's written a dozen articles, and she's raised significant funding for various dispute resolution research projects, and served as an officer of ACR and the International Association for Conflict Management and the Temple University Faculty Senate. She is going to talk to us today about trust in our work. So Trish, Ms. Trench Baby, take it over.
I love it. I love it. I have a new title, Miss Trench Baby, that I will wear proudly. I was sharing with Julie and Maria and Chloe and Nikki and Emily right before that I'm working with a group right now of high school students who are systems involved. They're either homeless or they're involved with juvenile justice or foster care, etc. And they are learning a variety of conflict management processes, including conflict coaching and mediation. And that's actually their name and slogan for themselves. Trench babies, we've lived it so we can help. So I want to give proper credit where credit is due. I also want to say that I am so thrilled to be here today, particularly to talk with old and new friends. One of the greatest things, and I'm always in awe of, Maria and Julie, what you guys have put together in terms of the breakfast and the ongoing connection. But I'm really looking forward to sharing some ideas with you about issues of trust that we've been working on, and really spurred by what we're seeing happening in a variety of ways after COVID, and with some of the difficulties I think that we all know that our country is having in terms of how people relate to one another in a variety of contexts. So in addition to being a professor at Temple University, go Owls, that mascot name does not inspire a lot of confidence. So I've been working for 32 years as a professor at Temple University to make that sound important, but one of these days I'm going to get it. Go Owls, right? One of the things that I also do is that I own a conflict coaching and ADR consulting firm, and have had the privilege to work with a number of organizations, a number of federal agencies, and a number of the state and community mediation organizations and private sector in the area of conflict coaching work. And so kind of the context of what I'm going to talk about today is primarily in terms of trust issues and working with trust issues in conflict coaching, but it's not limited to that, right? So one of the things I'd like to say at the outset is really would just love to hear your thinking. And if you're thinking in terms of the conflict coaching context, fantastic. If you're thinking in terms of mediation, facilitation, restorative practices, I'm just excited to hear your thoughts and your ideas as we move forward. I also want to say that at the beginning of most conversations, I always reflect a little bit on the fact that there's so much good work going out there that you can never kind of give credit to all of it when you're talking about a topic like this. So I'm going to be mentioning certain models and certain things that have really seemed to be of value to us as we've been doing our thinking forward. But I just want to again acknowledge that there are a lot of things we don't have time to bring up, particularly in the area of trust. There's so much wonderful thinking out there in a variety of contexts. And so I invite people today, if you are working in this area and you have resources or your own models or your own thoughts that you have put together and you would like to share that with everybody in chat, please feel free, please do so. I know that I will be the first person to copy down the chat file when Maria sends it to us at the end of the session to get all that wisdom as well. The last thing I think that I'd like to say as we move forward is love this to be as interactive a session as possible. So I have Emily and Nikki and Chloe and Julie who are going to be helping out with monitoring chat and bring up issues and questions that you have. But feel free, if you are so moved, to open that mic. Let us hear your voices. And if you want to work through chat, that's great. But please don't feel like you need to wait until the end of my talking. As many of my friends will know, you'd be waiting a long time, right? So just go ahead, enter into that conversation, and then we'll take it from there. So the topic is, and now you get to see those moments of tension, right? That no matter how many times we work with Zoom, it's always those transitional moments on Zoom that my heart flutters a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and pull up the PowerPoint that we're going to be working with today. All right. And by the way, a PDF of the PowerPoint is going to be available to you. I'm not sure whether it'll be put in chat. We can do that later on if you'd like. But please know that if you are an avid note taker, and if there's something here that you really want to avidly take notes on, don't worry, you can get that PDF and it'll be coming to you soon. We're going to be talking about trust. And I do believe the more that I do this work, that trust is the issue, particularly in workplace and family conversations, and also youth-based conversations. So the focus that we're going to have is really talking about how you might approach doing conflict coaching work around issues of trust, particularly in workplace and family conflicts. But again, please don't feel like our conversation is limited to those contexts. I think that there is as much, if not more, to say about how these thoughts about trust affect and inform our work in mediation, in facilitation, in restorative practices, etc. As we move forward, just a little bit on the way we hope to spend our time together today. We want to start a little bit by talking about, what do we mean by trust and distrust? And we'll talk more about kind of how that is important for how a conflict coach or perhaps a mediator pulling some of these techniques and tools into mediation process, particularly in a caucus process. How does this clarification affect how we might do our work with a party? We're going to talk about some very practical tools for addressing trust and distrust and conflict coaching. And those of you who know me, you know that I live in a world of theory and research, as many of you do. I love and live in a world of practice. Proudly am a pracademic, and I'm always interested in how well we translate really great ideas into really great practice. I'm not pretending that we've gotten to the great point yet on this work here, but I'm interested in your feedback and your thinking. But that's certainly one of the goals, a major goal for our talk today. And in doing so, I'm going to think a little bit about how trust and distrust link into these fundamental drivers of conflict, the identity, emotion, and power drivers that we use in our work in conflict coaching, but that are laced through all of the conflict literature and models. And also present to you at least 2, maybe 3 models of trust and distrust that I have found in the literature that I think are really helpful and valuable. We're going to work through those. We're going to talk about how I've translated those into some conflict coaching conversations and sets of questions. And we're also going to talk about some assessments that you may want to use or think about using if you want to help the party or parties you're working with get kind of a better handle on where they are in terms of trust, right? Again, kind of all as a starting place. I also want to say that I think I've always been interested in trust. Many people in our field have always been interested in trust. I personally feel that we are at a moment where the more our field can contribute to ways of helping people deal in low trust and distrust environments, the better. I was looking at a Pew Research study that was put out in 2019. And so this is prior to COVID, where they were really looking at the state of trust and distrust in America. And I can put a copy of that report into chat for folks if you'd like to do that a little bit later on. And, even before the COVID situation, and quite frankly, the ramp up of a number of issues that have made trust an even more pressing issue, at that point in time in 2019, they were reporting that, only 64% of the American public had trust in other members of the American public. And that wasn't broken down in terms of across political parties or across races. When they drilled down to that number dropped and dropped and dropped. That was in general, right? And 70% of the people that they were surveying said that in their lives and in their work, low trust was making it extremely difficult for them to collaborate and solve problems. So prior to COVID, 2/3 of the people being surveyed at Pew, and it was a very large survey, were acknowledging that they were feeling that the trust issues were really becoming central. And when compared with the previous trust survey that Pew had done, only I think it was 6 years before, that was a significant decrease in both of those markers by anywhere from 10 to 20%. So I know that I have people walking into my office, my practice, in the organizations that I work with, where they feel like they don't know if there's enough trust to even try to have the kind of conversations to move forward with somebody. And that's really been in the back of my mind about kind of sharing this topic with you today. So those are our goals for moving forward. And if you have other goals and want to throw them on in, I'm happy to pick those up. Follow the heat, as my good friend Michael Westoy says. We're going to follow the heat today. We're going to start following the heat by asking you to do a menti.com. So this is either going to go well or not, so we're going to see how well this works. Those of you who have done menti.com, you already have a sense of this. You're going to do it on your wonderful little devices, right? Your cell phones and or your iPads. And we're going to ask you to go to www.menti.com. And when you go to menti.com, you should enter the code 4975-6619. And in fact, Nikki, you are so on top of things and ahead of things, already has that for you in chat. And when you get there, you're going to be seeing 3 different sets of questions. 3 different slides we'll go through, one slide at a time, and you'll be prompted to answer those questions, and we'll see those answers come up on screen. So first thing we're going to do is to get out of here and to pull up that screen. And that was smoother than I anticipated. So I hope that everybody is seeing that first question that is up. All right, excellent. By the way, if you are not able to get onto Menti and you have some trepidations about trying to get onto Menti, feel free to put your answers to these questions in chat so that we can monitor and that you can have input as well. All right. So yeah, the first question that I was wanting to start with is, how is trust a critical issue in the conflicts in which you are involved as a third party? All right. So this is going to be a rolling, as you'll see, as people add things to the Menti, it will come up. So we're going to kind of go through and touch base on a number of these. I also want to mention that the text file for the responses on the Menti will be available after this session, and I will send those to Nikki and Emily and to Chloe and Maria and Julie, so that they can go ahead and have those and distribute those. All right. So some of the things coming up. All right. They've lost trust. Trust in family is greater than civil. Okay. Probably more than I think. What an interesting question and response to that question. Yeah. If there isn't trust, solutions aren't trusted to be real. Yeah. Very much an issue. Critical issue, cause of deadlocks. Almost every situation in a relationship. Trust brings out honesty. All right. Without it, no progress. Highly critical. Obviously not going to be touching on all of these. We have such a wonderful response today and attendance in the session. So we'll touch on some of those. The parties in conflict must trust the mediator to be neutral and to hear them. Yeah. And we know as third parties, as coaches and mediators, how critical that trust is that they have in us. But the degree to which they come in distrusting in a situation actually makes it more difficult for them to then transfer trust to anyone else that they're working with, right? And so that does become a concern for us in terms of how to adapt to that. Extremely critical. It's a must-have ante to even have the most basic of conversations. Yes, that is, I would put that comment on a t-shirt in my experience. Absolutely true. And that's true even in conflict coaching, when it's me and the person that I'm talking with, right? Much less having other parties to the conflict be there. Significant in most contexts, not willing to communicate. Exactly, right? A lot of trust issues around representational identity-based issues, race, gender, bias, etc. Right? Distrust that people bring to the initial discussion makes it really hard to get barriers lowered so that real communication can happen. And sometimes you're dealing with a long-term learned distrust or difficulty with trust that is compounded. And also, frankly, that has traumatized people who have been living in and working in these low trust areas or trust deserts. Again, hearkening back to my wonderful group of high school students that we're working with now. One of them the other day when we were talking about some issues that they were dealing with, I said, how would you define this particular context that they're working in? And we had been talking about trust, and one of them said it's a trust desert. And that image has stuck with me since that comment. So how do we water the trust desert? What do we do when it's that parched? And when, quite frankly, it's been that parched for a very long time. Either trust has been broken in the past or has never been established and needs to be built. Great comment, because it helps us remember that we're dealing with different kind of trust relationships, right? Again, either one that isn't active yet or hasn't been built, and so there might be a lot of reasons to talk about why that hasn't happened. But also a lot of relationships where trust has been damaged. And it may be damaged in a lot of different levels, and that may be acknowledged damage and recognized damage or not. Okay? So getting absolutely great comments to this question. So many great comments, right? Trust of fairness. Yeah. And do they feel like what we're doing now is fair and is moving forward? All right. And prior unresolved disputes and issues, trust issues in a long-term relationship. I am thinking of Kathy Goodman's comment at the beginning, right before we started, and she was sharing that she's doing work and, teaching a course on family business at Columbia upcoming, and how fraught family business situations are with trust, long-term, unacknowledged or poorly acknowledged trust issues in the relationship. So yeah, absolutely great. Anybody want to chime in on chat to just that, great array of responses that we've seen to the first question? That sparks something that somebody just feels like, I must have that mic. I have got to add something out loud.
Everybody should feel free to chime in. But Elizabeth Larson mentioned that she sees people wanting to participate in the mediation process civilly and suppressing anger or trust issues until they erupt. There really is a great multitude of comments, both in the chat and in the Menti. So thank you for everybody's participation.
Excellent. And one of the things that we'll talk a little bit about in a minute, but that I want to mention now in response to that great idea is I do think that the trust issues that we face help us. They give us an opportunity of thinking even more strategically than we already are. I think our field does a wonderful job of this, but even more strategically about how do we think about getting a sense of the level of trust issues in screening or in intake that may help us to figure out whether or not, for example, conflict coaching is a process that may be particularly helpful in this situation as someone is hopefully going to then go forward to mediation or to some other kind of a dyadic or a multi-party process. I find it in workplace situations, one of those things where it's increasingly important to, if you're doing a group facilitation or a group dialogue, to be able to be thinking up front about where is the trust or where isn't the trust as people move forward into, would it help to be giving some conflict coaching opportunities to some people within this group or to both parties or all parties in a mediation before having them go into that process? To what extent would that conflict coaching exposure or other kinds of exposure prepare them to get the most out of, to optimize their experience in the other situation? All right, so let's go to slide number 2. Slide number 2 Please indicate the extent to which you agree with each of the following statements. Please indicate the extent to which you agree with each of the following statements. And I'm reading that out loud and reading these out loud, you know, because I'm so hooked into kind of 508 compliance accessibility issues. So it's, I know that you can access yourself. The first statement is trust is the opposite of distrust. The second, we should screen for assess trust issues in the conflict as a means of recommending appropriate conflict processes. Third, parties usually need help in clarifying and discussing trust issues in their conflicts. Fourth, clarifying trust issues significantly helps identify and put in action constructive conflict management. Fifth, conflict coaches should view trust issues discussions as a core component of their practice. Sixth, mediators should view trust issues discussions as a core component of their practice. And seventh and last, clarifying and discussing trust issues are outside the appropriate work of conflict coaches and mediators. All right. And as we have people chime in, I love this particular format of questioning on Menti, because what you're seeing show up on the screen as people add their responses is the mean score, the average score on this 5-point scale for each of these items. But it is also showing you in that shaded background, in that particular color for that item, it kind of gives you a sense of where some of the scores are being distributed. What is the variance or variability of those scores, right? Are they all kind of aligned in the same direction? Or are they kind of spread out widely? So you have a real kind of difference and variation of opinion on that item, all right? So we've got 43 folks who've answered this. We'll give another 10 seconds, 15 seconds or so. And those of you who have finished entering your scores, if you'd like to enter into chat other statements that you would have loved to have seen up on this question, please feel free to do that. All right, so we've got about 61 people have answered so far. I know we may be getting more in, but that's a really nice group of responses. So let me ask you, and on this one, I really will ask for a couple of people to open mic and speak out. Is there anything that really catches your eye in this set of answers that you'd like to speak to some extent, either because you really agree with where that score is, or that you really are wondering why that score? I don't understand why we would have that score. So let me invite a couple of folks, the bold and the beautiful, to open their mic.
I think it's totally inappropriate to say that clarifying and discussing trust issues are outside of our appropriate work. I mean, I can't imagine not in one way or another exploring that if it felt relevant.
Thank you, Julie.
Shakira, I think you're up next with your hand first, I see.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for this. This is wonderful. I was taken by the very first statement that trust is the opposite of distrust. I never thought about it like that, and I put 3. That was my response as well. And I think it's because, first of all, there are a couple of different domains of trust. And distrust, I mean, trust, I think, involves a level of a willingness to be vulnerable in a certain way. And I think it has something to do with in a state of distrust that you've determined that there's already a reason for you not to like there's a certitude in when you're experiencing a state of distrust, whereas in a state of trust you are willing to be vulnerable, like you're there has yet to be something proven, I think, when you're in a state of trust. And so anyway, I just was a little fascinated by that one.
What great comments, Shakira. And, you basically have, forecast for us kind of an important way of thinking about trust and distrust. And so thank you very much for that. This is one of those questions that, people working in the area of trust all over and all contexts, still have a sensibility of, well, really, how do we feel about this? So we're going to be sharing kind of the predominant view in our field of dispute resolution, that there definitely are different aspects, and that the way you describe them, I think, is about as close to perfect. So thank you very much.
We have another hand up from Midlands Mediation Center.
I'm sorry, my name's not there. This is Sabrina. I apologize. I'll make sure I update that. I think my wrestle was with mediators should view trust issue discussions. It was that word discussion that probably made me put it on a lower perspective, because most time in mediation, we don't have a whole lot of time to really dive into a dialogue or a discussion about the trust issues. I think for mediation, trust is an important, a core component of the mediation within our practice, and we should have a clear understanding of what it looks like and what it sounds like. But as far as a discussion on it, I think we're limited sometimes with that full discussion on it, where I think as a conflict coach, you have the time, because it's necessary to make sure that there is that discussion to flush out what trust look like and what it sounds like in a coaching session.
Yeah. Thank you, Sabrina. Yeah. It's also one of those things that it's really tough if you open that area of conversation and then you don't have time and you have to shut it down in a mediation where time is often not in our control. Really difficult. You wonder to yourself, did I do more damage than good in even trying to raise that? Yeah.
Michelle Arbid, you, I think, are our last intervener. Oh, maybe the second Michelle, but Michelle Arbid, you can ask your question next.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Tricia, I'm struck by something here, which is sort of this consideration that I'm having around the difference between, or the difference that and role that trust plays in a short-term process versus a long-term process. And I made an earlier comment about trust for the practitioner. And I'm thinking to examples where perhaps we've observed, clients or participants who have appeared to not be forthcoming or transparent for whatever reason. And what that thought led me to is the separation that may exist between trust and judgment. How do we approach? How do we handle? How do we view or think about participants who appear to not be forthcoming? And how easy or difficult is it to separate our judgment of that person? And I'm struck by the difference in the way that might show up in a short term versus long term. In a mediation, I think probably a lot less impactful, because as was mentioned earlier, we don't exactly have the time typically to really get into those dynamics, and they may not even show up as often. But I'm thinking to something like more organizational development related, where if that becomes apparent or if that starts to play a role, I'm just thinking about the impact. And so going back to your earlier question about what question could be here, I'm really thinking about what happens when that trust shows up and impacts the practitioner.
Yeah. Oh, Michelle, thank you very much. And for several really, really nice ideas. Yeah, that shining that kind of light on how we as the mediators, the coaches, the third parties, the facilitators, how we give or do not give, do or do not judge, the trust that is happening in this process or with a particular party is one of the areas that I think is really important for us to think about, particularly in terms of ethics and reflections and reflective practice issues. But your short-term and long-term is wonderful because that, the cycles of trust, we tend to think of and talk in terms of trust is or trust isn't. Trust is present, trust is not. Distrust is present, distrust is not. And pulling back and watching and looking at the cycles of trust. A little bit later on, we'll talk about a process, a tool that we have developed called Turning Points, a Trust Turning Points worksheet, and invite you to kind of come back. But those are great thoughts. And we have a couple of other hands that are up. I think we had Michelle Kirschbaum, I saw, and then John. I think that might be the folks in queue.
Yes, thank you. Hi, Trish.
Hi, Michelle.
Good to see you. I was really struck by the second one of screening for trust to recommend a particular ADR process, or maybe that meant to screen out, because almost everybody walks in the room with trust issues, and it's almost always, a big part of what that conflict is about. So I can't imagine screening for it or assessing it in the beginning as much as dealing with it in the midst of the work. Yeah. So I was surprised that folks thought that it was something, that indicator was so far to the right.
Yeah, great point. And the statement itself could have been interpreted in a couple of different ways, at least, right? So that may have, resulted in that. At the end of our talk, we'll talk a little bit more about that and actually kind of end with that as a primary discussion question and learn more, I think, behind this 3.4 mean score, but also talk about the practical realities of doing that, but also the ethical concerns of doing that. And so I look forward to that conversation. All right. We can take just a couple more folks here, and then we have one more slide for you, and then we want to move forward to talking about, so how do we coach trust if this is what's happening with us? So I will, Nikki, let you go back to queue. I think that we had John.
John, I don't see your hand up. If you are still willing to have your question, you can, but why don't, in the meantime, Robin has had her hand dutifully raised. So let's pivot to you.
Great.
Thanks, Nikki. I'm struck by the idea of screening for trust and thinking of it as kind of a tip of an iceberg, that in addition to the trust issues at hand with the other party and the issue that we're dealing with, people have their underlying feelings about trust or the trust that they carry around with them. It reminds me in a very different context of dating, when you ask people what their main criteria are and looking for someone who mentions honesty has been burned. And trust is sort of, if you can walk around and be a trusting person, but if you have been burned, you don't, and you carry that with you wherever you go. And so the idea of screening for trust in mediation, for instance, just seems like such a vast issue. There's trust in the party and the matter at hand, but there's also all the baggage that people bring. So it's intriguing, but daunting to think about screening for that.
Yeah, great point. And you also have people who just psychologically have a greater or lesser propensity to trust in any situation, right? And you also have cultural connections to trust. So, there are cultural influences on whether or not people are more likely to trust and whom and in what circumstance. Yeah, so brings in an awful lot. All right. Well, I hate to not allow more of this conversation because, wow, it's been great. But we're going to move on to be able to go to our very last slide. And that is, in which of the following conflict contexts do you currently engage in clarifying, discussing trust issues with parties? And so this asks you to kind of rank which of these you do more or less in. And if you have other contexts that you work in where you do a lot of trust conversation and it's not there, go ahead and put the other, that's what that other stands for. And if you feel like none of the contexts that you work in have been mentioned, or you do not work with trust issues in any of those contexts that have been mentioned, go ahead and note that as well. So again, this will be our last Menti slide. So we'll give folks a chance just to get a handle on where people are with that. You all are becoming Menti pros. We'll give it another 10 seconds or so. There is something so engaging about watching the colors shift and the trading of places.
As the election results come in, we're starting to be in this season, and there have been some questions about whether we will share the Menti slides as well, and I think that will be quite possible. We'll put them up on the website and send them out as a resource attached to all of the registrants for this meeting as well.
Yes, yeah. After the Menti is closed down, I will get the printout essentially of what happened in the Menti administration, and then I will send that through to you, Nikki, and or to anybody else I should be sending that through to, and that can be distributed. And of course, we also, one of the great things about Menti for me in a recorded session is other people who were not able to be here who want to then see that Menti product, we're seeing it live, so they'll have the readout of that as well. All right, we have about, again, almost about 60 folks here. So number 1, workplace, number 2, family, followed by community, neighbor, business, commercial. Youth-based just got a little bump up there in the number 4. The other, right? And some people said none of the context mentioned, all right? So workplace and family, and I think for a number of different reasons. I am interested in the other, if people want to mention in chat, what kind of other contexts that they are working in where trust-related issues are coming up for them. And they are working with that as a third party. Okay. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and take me out of the Menti slides and get us back into the PowerPoint. And that way I can also see chat again. All right. So David, you say you work with Braver Angels and Mediators Bond Borders International. Excellent, on community and political identity conflicts. Bioethics environments. Thank you, Anastasia. Wonderful. Okay. All right. So I hope you enjoyed Menti. We certainly enjoyed the responses that you gave us to the Menti. Let's talk a little bit about kind of defining trust and distrust, and then moving to kind of how does this fit with a conflict coaching conversation? And then we're going to isolate and focus on a couple of trust-related models that I think are great conversational frames or templates that you can use to start having trust-related conversations in a conflict coaching situation. And again, using those perfectly coachables, pulling those through to a group facilitation or pulling those through to a mediation as well. But I'll be talking primarily about conflict coaching. So I think it was, as Shakira had mentioned earlier, she gave some great definitions of trust and distrust. So I want to give a shout out back to her. But yeah, the general conversational definition of trust is when you've got a firm reliance on the integrity, ability, or character of a person or thing, right? So it's really in the realm of expectations in terms of feeling that because they've got these, they have integrity, or they have ability or competence, or they are a certain kind of person, that they are trustworthy, that you have trust in them. Distrust, and I'm taking this from Roy Lewicki's great work on trust and distrust in negotiation, which we'll talk a little bit more about. It's one of the models that I find very useful in a conflict coaching conversation. But again, I think Shakira hit this on the head. because they define distrust as the confident expectation that another's motives, intentions, and behaviors are sinister and harmful to one's own interests. So that Shakira was talking about the idea that in a trust situation, there is a willingness to be vulnerable. There is an expectation of possible, trust happening and deepening and working in this relationship. But in a distrust situation, the wall is up, right? Something, for some reason, it may not be them, by the way, it may be other things in that person's life, but the distrust wall is up. And that distrust wall means that they have a confidence, a certainty, a certitude, as Shakira said, that this other person is going to harm them or is interested in harming them in some way. Another way I love Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety and safe spaces. And another way to think about this is the fact that people have come to a conclusion that they feel confident and having, that I cannot have a safe space with this individual or with this group or with this organization, right? So one of the things that people talk about in terms of this contrast of trust and distrust, and here's another kind of a summary. I like this slide because Feltman has a nice, his book on he goes the thin book of trust, but it actually does have a lot of really good stuff. Might be small, but it's mighty, right? That this kind of contrast, to kind of summarize what we've talked about, is when you are trusting or willing to trust, you're choosing to risk, to make yourself vulnerable, to make something you value vulnerable to another person's actions. And distrust is what is valuable to me isn't safe with this person in this situation or any situation. And that means that when we think and talk about trust and distrust in our work with people, that they are not the same thing. Trust is not the opposite of distrust, right? I can have little or no trust and a lot of trust. That's one dimension. And I can have little or no distrust or great distrust. That is a second dimension. But they are not bipolar opposites, so that you have to think of trust and distrust in the same way for that same person in the same situation. That in and of itself frees us as mediators and coaches to be able to think about, are we wanting to have, or does it make sense to be having a trust conversation or a distrust conversation? Why, right? And of course, as always, since these are party-centered processes, how that works, all right? We've had a little bit of, a question here about the extent to which global definitions of trust and distrust are really helpful when you're doing conflict coaching and or mediation or facilitation work. When people are operating at kind of the 30,000 foot level on trust, is that good enough? Is that good enough? And I think that in my work, and again, invite those of you to chime on in as well. In my work, one of the things that has made having trust conversations more difficult is that we're not going below the 30,000 foot level. We need conversations that we have that are more specific, that are more granular about what do we mean, what do they mean by trust in this situation with this party, or distrust in this situation with this party? And how are we having conversations around those enactments or behaviors or focuses of trust or distrust for them? And again, a couple of the models that we're going to walk through a little bit later, I've chosen because I think they give us that ground level view and help people talk about not I do or I don't trust you, I do or I don't distrust you, but what do I trust or not trust about you? What would make trust change for me if you were doing or saying something different? And then how can I change this situation or of trust by doing or saying or enacting things differently, or asking or supporting you to do that. I'm a huge believer in bringing it to the level of behavior, and that's the way people work through, work toward, work beyond. And I think that applies to trust and distrust very much, right? And we can add lots of components of trust and distrust to what I'm going to talk about. And we have a number of really great things happening in chat. I think that, a couple of comments, Elizabeth's comment, people thinking they're protecting themselves by being distrustful, but actually, might be in their self-interest to trust. A great comment, because that area of going to the distrust default can be very damaging to the party. And one of the things that can help them get out of a distrust default is to help them break down what really is the distrust about, and hence where could they go, which would be safer, right? It doesn't have to be that everything beyond this point is unsafe, and globally so. So it helps them think about, that flexibility perhaps in terms of a distrust option. Leslie's comment, when working with corporate clients discussing company culture, trust equal action. Yes, will leadership do what they say? How will they do what they say? Who is saying they will do what they say? Right. Take it to the action, take it to the behavioral level. And in the conversations, to me, in my experience, it's so much more helpful, because a lot of times people will have these insights about, well, when I think about it that way, it's easier for me to see to what degree and in what way I trust them or not, and how their behavior has contributed to that, or how my behavior has contributed to that. Okay. So again, Jesse's comment found that trust is often built not through an explicit conversation about trust, but through parsing through past interactions and clarifying impact and intent. Yes. Yeah. And your comment about once one negative assumption a party holds about the other is shifted or challenged, trust can grow exponentially. Yeah. But to take that dial back, right, and be able to have someone look at what did happen and to what extent and with what impact on trust, that's a conversation that, as coaches and mediators, it's important for us to feel comfortable having, right? And Rita, your comment, their language, I don't trust them. I find for movement to rebuild trust requires the question of, are you willing? Yes. Trust is a state of mind and motivation, as well as a condition of action and behavior. And helping them think through and talk about those things, critical. So let's move to the conversation, and thank you for everybody who's putting these great ideas and comments in chat. Again, we are in a room. Sure thing. Oh, sorry about that. My Siri also thought your comments were absolutely wonderful. Just wanted you to know that. We are sitting in a room of people who have so much experience, with this work. And so learning from one another is great. I love Dennis's comment, trust, I know it when I feel it, which leads to something we'll mention a little bit later, which is that, trust is not simply a state of mind, it's a state of heart. And it is a state of behavior. So it's a very complex thing to help somebody think about and talk through. All right. So I know many of you know a great deal about conflict coaching, and a great deal of more than I do about conflict coaching. But for those of you who may not do a lot of conflict coaching work, just wanted to take 1 minute to kind of introduce that process. So since we're talking about it so much for the next 40 minutes, it's a one-on-one process with a trained third-party neutral, working with a particular party. And it can happen at any point in a conflict management arc. So someone can come in for conflict coaching prior to going into another process like mediation or facilitation or arbitration. They can be doing conflict coaching while they are in another ADR process. And they can do conflict coaching after another ADR process. So that, for example, in co-parenting plan situations, they can be doing conflict coaching after that plan has been put forward to help them with ongoing implementation and trust issues. But they also, and a lot of us do conflict coaching that is as a standalone process. So although it's very helpful to ramp to or connect with another ADR process, it's certainly a standalone in its own right. And the three goals of most conflict coaching models, and again, there's so much really great work in conflict coaching that is out there. So I don't, I want to say, and I hope that's not an overstatement, I really believe that all of the conflict coaching models that I know of really touch on these three goals. They may emphasize them slightly differently, but I think this is kind of at the heart of where we are all trying to go with this work. So it doesn't have to be a model from a particular standpoint. They want to help the party understand and analyze their conflict from their own and from the other party's perspectives, whoever else they are in that conflict with. And that understanding and analyzing the conflict is very much connected with coming to an understanding of what's driving that conflict. What is keeping that conflict alive, even if they may want to be able to move beyond it, let go of it. It's still churning. So what's happening there? A second goal is to really think about a preferred direction forward for a relationship in a conflict situation that may or may not involve the other party. So, thinking about, whether that be visioning a best possible situation, whether that be a goal setting orientation, or whether that be co-constructing a new narrative, but it's a way forward, and it's a way that people want to be living for reasons that they've already come to understand, right? And the third goal is to develop some skills to help that person make it happen, to get there, right? To enact that preferred situation. So, as the one-on-one process, in our model, we use kind of a narrative underlying a sense in our model as well. But I just want to kind of mention that, in our model, which some of you know and many of you may not, starting with that initial kind of what's going on in this conflict, what's that story, then moving in analysis, the deeper dive to exploring the perspectives of identity, emotion, and power, and then to visioning and crafting the best story, that best outcome, that best vision or lived experience. And then working with, okay, now that you can see where you would like to be and why, let's talk about what actions and what skills do you need to be able to know that you can make it happen the way you want to make it happen, and with a confidence that you will actually make it happen once you transfer this learning to your everyday situation.
Trish, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but
Sure.
some people are having a little bit of difficulty with the rendering of your slides. It seems
Sure.
to get better if you kind of browse your mouse around the full slide so that it's clearer.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And this one is working. There's a little bit of a disturbance in the kind of upper right-hand corner. But if this continues, I can step in and share slides. But thank you, everybody, for your patience. And it seems to be working okay now. It's just a little bit slow with the rendering. But apologies.
Okay. No, my apologies. I think my model wants to go back to bed. It says, well, this is what you get when you drag me out, early in the morning. But thank you for that heads up, and give me a heads up if we continue to have any more difficulty with that. All right. So, because fuzzy PowerPoint is, not a fun thing. And yeah, it says, there's a comment here. Is there a way to remove transcript? It covers the slides. So let me see if we can close that out. Anastasia, did that work for you?
You should be able to toggle on the transcript at the bottom of your Zoom interface with a little box with CCs on it. That's a user controlled element. So,
okay, I am not sure where that is. That's not pulling up on a toolbar for me.
Yeah,
So.
no, that's not something that you have control over. It's
Good,
just an
okay.
option. So I'll directly message Anastasia to help.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you. I love hearing that this is not something I have control over. It allows me to move forward, happy in the world. So, we already talked about the, trust and distrust, and that they are really different kinds of things. But I want to say a moment about how critical they are as drivers of conflict linked to identity, emotion, and power. Because for me and my model, for those people who work with identity, emotion, power issues in other models, when we're talking about the complexity of trust and distrust, right? To be trusted, to be trustworthy, to be distrusted, to be unworthy of trust is a huge issue of identity, right? And who gets to claim trust, right? That's a huge issue. So when we're thinking about talking with people about how trust and distrust are operating in their conflict, this becomes clearly something that could be fleshed out in the identity. Talks with them about how they see themselves, how they want to be seen, and how the other parties see themselves or want to be seen. What do you do when you think you're trustworthy and in the following ways, but you understand that you are being seen as untrustworthy and for other kinds of reasons? Trust is an emotion. Distrust is an emotion. It's an emotional experience. And the people who work particularly in the family area talk a lot about that connection to emotion. So, there are a lot of feelings of shame and guilt and anger and pride and things that come up when people are thinking about where they are in this trust relationship. And the power and the agency, the fact that I remember, situations where in my life, someone has, in a moment of uncertainty and risk, said to me, trust me. And I had to make the decision to do it or not. I will trust you or not. That decision to bestow trust on someone else is incredibly empowering for them, right? That, when we're talking about making something happen and having agency and influence, it's very hard to have agency and influence without trust, and especially hard to have agency and influence with distrust. Although some people who are distrustworthy and want to be distrustworthy can have great agency out of being seen as that party or that entity that threatens us, right? So in the conversations in conflict coaching, the stage 2 for our model is one of those places where conversations about trust and distrust are so naturally connected. Clearly, when you're thinking about trust and escalation, right? Patterns of escalation and emotional triggering, then there's a clear relationship here to helping people think about how a sense of untrust or untrustworthiness can trigger and escalate a conflict, but also how an establishment of trust may be able to de-escalate conflicts in particular ways. And earlier we mentioned this idea of propensity to trust, right? Which has been in the trust literature for a very long period of time. It's a general tendency that people have, for a variety of reasons, to be willing to engage in trust, and with one party or with several people. So one of the things we know about propensity to trust is that it has strong patterns of interactions that people have had before, but it also brings a very strong set of parameters to a new relationship. And so many times, as in conflicts we deal with in other contexts, someone may be dealing with a conflict and with trust issues in a conflict, not because of how they have acted together in their relationship in the workplace or in the family or in another context, but because of how the expectations have been shaped for the other party or for them in previous interactions. It's really changed that propensity to trust. And last but not least, when we think about moving forward, going to a different place, going to that best story or that vision of what you really want to live, understanding that trust is a necessary but not sufficient condition for collaboration and for the enactment of collaboration. You know, it's all, there's this great series of research, which I won't bore you with, but a couple of really great meta-analyses that go and cover a couple of hundred different studies looking at this particular question and having a really strong conclusion that, you know, you cannot engage realistically and effectively in collaborative work with someone else without at least a moderate level of trust. But just having that moderate level of trust is not necessarily going to get you there either, right? More work in terms of making that collaboration happen, as we know, as dispute resolution folks. And in the area of distrust, so if you're coaching and working with somebody and you're at that point where they've talked about what they'd really like to see happen, what is their best story or their preferred outcome, and they have noticed or commented that there is distrust that they have, that if distrust is in the picture, the present picture or the future picture, that there needs to be a conversation about external accountabilities to ensure a safe situation. So as a coach, if I'm working with somebody where distrust is there and it's huge and it's something that we've talked about and talked through, that I know that another conversation that's going to be important to have when we talk about enactment of that best story is going to be, okay, how can you create safety for yourself with this person so that although distrust may continue to exist, you don't feel as vulnerable and you feel safe enough to be able to move forward and do the work you want to do, okay? This, by the way, is one of those points where it's really important to remember that difference between trust and distrust, because sometimes if you're just focusing on trust and you're working with somebody and they're getting to that, yes, I think I can do this. Yes, I want to do this. Yes, I think that this, you know, I'm willing to try to move forward to attempt to trust this person. But distrust has been a super strong theme. The need to have this other conversation is really important. I have a couple of chat thoughts coming in. Sandy says, I wonder if it is possible to separate our ability to trust from our expectations. You know, it's a great question. Most of the work in the area of trust, and there's, I mean, you can look at like the great work that Daniel Baron has done on his book on trust and conflict resolution in the Middle Eastern context. You know, you can look at, there's a great new dissertation that was just published by John Rush out of Kennesaw State University in 2018. Really fine overview of trust and conflict and how trust and distrust work. Anyway, you know, I can put those sources in chat for you later on if you'd like. But pretty much everybody is working from the assumption that trust and distrust are about expectations. And so I would love to hear your thinking about, if you could separate ability to trust from our expectations, what would that look like, Sandy? What would that look like? And feel free to, you know, take a look, you know, answer in chat, or even open mind if you want. Open mind. Yes, open mind, open mic. If you want.
I'll do open mic.
All right, great.
I am looking at this from my own experience in deciding a few years ago that when I have expectations of other people, it gets me in difficulty.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm trying not to have expectations. And yet, the idea really struck me on the slide that we're seeing right now. Distrust creates demands for external accountabilities to ensure a safe situation for continuing to work together. My viewpoint comes from a Christian perspective, where I've decided I don't have to have expectations of other people because I can trust God to make it safe.
Mm-hmm.
So whether I trust people or not, I can just press on with what I think should be done, and then trust God to take care of me in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
But I would only, if I were a conflict coach, then I would only be able to use that idea with people who would be of a similar mindset. And so that's where my question came from. Is it really possible to separate those expectations from your ability to trust, especially when it comes to that safe situation?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sandy. And in listening to that, a couple of thoughts came to my mind. And one is that, I'm hearing this kind of sense of kind of multi-layers of trust. So the not needing to have expectations about how you trust me, because you have faith and expectations about who else is or what else handles and creates a trusting environment or a safety environment, and that may be because of faith. I'm thinking to myself, it could also be because of different cultural situations, people who are, have that cultural, that group, that, community, where, hey, even if I end up not being able to trust you, I'm not that worried about it because I trust them, and they are here. So it raises a lot of very interesting conditions. Also raises a question for me about how valuable, even if someone else does not think the way you were just expressing, how valuable that is as a conversation to have as a coach. I mean, do you think, Sandy, if I'm working with you as a party, do you think that you in your life and what's going on for you now, that you can separate out whether you expect something from this person and whether or not you have trust in them? That's a great conversation. Definitely. Yeah. Let's talk about one of the things that I did before kind of going to the kind of more specific pull-out models that I want to emphasize a little bit more, excuse me, was I wanted to just kind of put down, and those of you who know me know I have a tendency to do question. But I wanted to kind of put down what I think are central trust conversations, that these are not exhaustive, but ones that as a coach, I really think are important to have, no matter which finer frame you end up working with later on. So I'm going to kind of riff through these a little bit, because you'll have these in the PowerPoint slides. But I, again, just want to acknowledge up front that this is a work in progress. It's not exhaustive in any way, but here are my thoughts. I like the idea of talking with somebody about kind of their general orientation to trust, right? And, what are they, do they easily trust, that, again, propensity to trust question, do they easily trust, in what ways, with what kind of people, what's the kind of history of that? Because I think it does matter for people to be able to have a conversation of what does trust mean to them in their life in general. Maybe this question comes from a place where I've said to my friends, and they already know this about me, I think one of my reasons for being back in this life is because, hey, I have more work to do on trust, and that this work and this career is, I think, how I'm living that through, and hopefully living that to accomplishment. But having someone to be able to start out and think, at least, or reflect for themselves on that. Then asking questions about kind of what's going on here in this situation with trust. So how would you describe the trust relationship, right? That is so different than, do you trust them? Do they trust you? It's like, but let's talk about this trust relationship, like we talk about power relationships, right? So who trusts whom here, to what degree, and is that trust more or less than desired or expected? And how does that affect this conflict, right? Can we get this outline, this initial graph out for me however you want? What's the trust relationship that you would describe? What are your trust expectations of them, right? What do they say or do to build trust? And of course, this might be a good place to bring in Sandy's question about, do you think trust has to go hand in hand with expectations? Why not, right? But assuming expectations are important to talk about, what are your trust expectations of them? What do they say or do to build trust or to damage trust? What are their trust expectations of you? Do you know that? Right? And here, this is one of those areas where in the literature and in practice, this is one of the blind spots that we often find people have. I actually am not sure the degree to which they trust me and why. And I'm, as a result, not sure of what it is that I say or do, or don't say or don't do, that builds that or damages that with them. So a need for a trust kind of conversation that often has not been had in many conversations, in many relationships. One of my favorite, what have been the turning points in your trust relationship? This comes from work by a woman named Leslie Baxter in my field of communication many years ago in the early 80s. She was an interpersonal communication and relationship scholar, and she had this wonderful theory of turning points. And part of it was simply that, the retrospective sense making we have in our relationships. And she would actually have people, graph out from beginning of this relationship to where you are now, what were critical turning points that happened in the relationship on this little timeline? When did they happen? What were they? And what impact or value did they have to you? Well, I've kind of become enamored with this work on turning points and actually have put together a trust turning points worksheet where it literally asks people, so what have been the trust turning points for you in this relationship? And, ask them to graph that out and mark that out from their perspective and from the other party's perspective, right? I mean, where do you think if they were doing this trust turning points worksheet, how would they be filling this out? Right? Would the spikes be in the same places for the same actions, in the same height, in the same direction? How are these things being seen differently? And the turning points worksheet helps you think about, well, what is it that I don't know about key turning points for them, or that they don't know for that turning point for me? Meta communication, always critical. How well do you talk about trust together, right? Do you have those conversations, and can you have those conversations? And then motivation. Are you motivated to repair or build trust, right? And letting people own not wanting that to happen. How motivated are they, right? Maybe they are ready to literally move on, right? Go away for whatever reason, okay? And if you've tried to repair or build trust together in the past, how successful has that been? What are those patterns of success that you've seen before? And last but not least, ideally, what will be the trust relationship if you move forward as desired? And those of you who, again, have worked with me or work in my model, you can see this kind of arc of these central trust conversations following the flow of how we have our work in terms of the initial, what's happening, the three perspectives drill down, and then the best story. But ideally, what will be the trust relationship if you move forward as desired? Will it remain the same? Will it be different? If so, what, when, where, how of the trust behaviors and interactions? What protections are going to be there in the case of a distrust? And what accountability will be in place? right? How do we have our trust checkups and make sure that we are doing what we're hoping will be done in terms of living out trust together the way we want to, right? And what's going to help make that a reality, right? Again, what other kinds of supports or skills or resources might make a big difference there? So in my mind, looking across these, having a general or central trust conversation following the flow of our conflict coaching process, those are kind of the key starters, at least, that I would start with. Right? But I also want to spend our last 12, 13 minutes or so on a couple of models of trust in the literature that I also think have a lot of value as drill downs in more specific conversations. And again, want to give credit to all the people who are putting these forwards. So the Reina and Reina have done a lot of work in workplace conflict related to trust. They have a book, I think their last book came out in 2015 or something like that. But I really like their work. I kind of was very attracted to this because they argued initially, they still argue with refinement, but it's great stuff, that when we talk about whether we trust or don't trust somebody, that it's really helpful to break it down into these three components of expectations. So for example, instead of my saying, I trust Michael or I don't trust Michael, can we talk about, okay, contractually or in terms of my expectations about what role or work Michael does or doesn't do, right? How much do I trust him contractually, right? Is he doing what he says he would do? Is he doing his role? Is he doing his job, right? And, that contractual kind of, here's what I put in, here's what you put in, helps to kind of bring it to that level, especially if conflicts are around interdependency issues, all right? He's supposed to do this. I need him to do that. He's not doing that, or vice versa. The second area or type of trust they talk about is communication trust. And the communication trust is really important in my mind, obviously. And that is basically, are people saying what needs to be said, how it needs to be said, when it needs to be said to the person who needs to hear it? So there's kind of a lot packed up in there, right? And they have wonderful stuff in their new book and in some of their shorter articles about different ways to parse this out. But this encompasses questions of honesty and openness and self-disclosure and vulnerability and protectiveness of the other. So a lot of times when I do conflict coaching work, people have trust-related issues. And when we start talking about these three types of trust, the communication area of trust is one that really can open up in that conversation. All three of these are germane, but I find that one tends to have the most in terms of, wait a minute, when I break that down and I think about that communication patterning we have, that is where the trust is being damaged. That's where the expectation is not being met. And then there's the competence trust. Is this person able to do their job or do what needs to be done here? I mean, I may love you, think you're a great person, want to, spend time with you, have a great social connection with you. But the bottom line is you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing. And I cannot trust that you have the competence to do work or to do a particular thing that needs to get done in this situation with me, and that's damaging our relationship. So for Reina and Reina's three types of trust, introducing those three types to a person that you're talking with and coaching with, but you can also have conversations. And what I've done is to just kind of, give again some templates of possible conversations that you might be able to have here. This is a case as applied to a team process in a workplace, because this is great for team trust issues. Great. You can use the Reina and Reina work to facilitate not only conflict coach people within that team, but facilitate an entire set of conversations about trust is the issue for them. So how much do relational and team members trust each other on each one of these things, right? They have a great questionnaire you can give out. People can do a 360, lots of different ways, or you can have that in open different kinds of facilitated dialogue. How do you know that, right? What do you see or hear that's leading you to that assumption that this trust is really at the confidence level as opposed to communication? Have you addressed the trust issues, right? How have you helped others address the trust issues? And of course, has that worked very well? And how does the organization or others in the workplace influence the levels of trust? We always live in these rings of trust, don't we? Right? And we can get our trust going really, really well, and something comes in from the outside and, upsets the apple cart. So what else is happening there, especially in this workplace or in this family, that create that difficulty? Back to the turning points idea. I'm going to, I love this. I absolutely love this. So using that trust turning points worksheet and any modifications you might want to make to it to do kind of what we already talked about before, right? So we've already kind of gone through this. And then they have a really nice model for coaching trust repair, right? So coaching somebody about how might they be able to repair trust. And this is one of the graphics from one of their earlier articles, and you can basically talk to people about, well, here are like the 7 steps of repairing trust that they suggest. After we talk about what they are, so have you or have they tried these repairs? Can you tell me kind of what's your repair history, right? How well did that work, right? Which of these repair strategies worked, which of them didn't, and why, right? And are you or are they willing to try them again? Okay. So again, one of the things I love about Raina and Raina's work is it almost always helps somebody go from 30,000 feet straight to the lived experience, but in these 3 types of trust that they can see, understand, and really work through in terms of the what's happening or what's not happening, but also allows them to take that and to translate that to a longer term relationship and then move to that stage of, so how do we make it better? How do we make it better? Okay. The last model I'm going to mention here, because of time, is the Lewicki et al. Model. Roy Lewicki and his colleagues have done a super job talking about trust related to negotiations for many years. I actually was in Ottawa, Canada about 3 weeks ago and got a chance to see Roy in person. I've known him for a very long time and had a chance to he's still going, teaching in Ohio State, doing the trust research work. And they have this idea that, in the interest of time, I'll just kind of go to the base of it, that when they think about trust or talk about trust, they talk about it as calculus-based trust or identification-based trust. And basically, you can have calculus-based trust based on a consistency of behavior. People will do what they say they're going to do, right? That's, again, that expectation. They're following through. I was going to do this. I will do this. I did do this, right? And then the identification-based trust, which we haven't talked about too much yet today, and that is, I trust you because you're like me. So I'm not just more willing to hire you or be with you or give you a reward, but I trust you more because you are like me, right? Because I identify with what you value, what you think, what you feel, and what you need. And that is an important kind of trust conversation that you can have with somebody, right? Because if somebody says, well, it's not so much what they do. Well, how about this idea? Does this idea give you a kind of a resonance or an insight as to why you feel that trust for them or with them, or why you don't? And of course, the why you don't is that thinking about their model where they also have calculus-based distrust and identification-based distrust, right? I distrust you. The wall is up, not because of anything you've done, but because you are not me. You are not me, right? We think, feel, value so differently that it's simply too risky to engage. And I am making this assumption that I cannot and will not trust you because you will be malevolent because of who you are. We could have lots of conversations about identification-based distrust. Hope we do more in the future. And then the calculus-based distrust is simply, you have failed to do what you've said so often that you're off my speed dial, right? I mean, you're out of the picture. Okay? And one of the things I love about Lewicki et al.'s work is they have, some really nice insights about how you can repair if there are violations to trust. I've got a document I'm going to put in to chat in just a minute, right? So that you can kind of see that a little bit more in detail. And as a coaching conversation, just to kind of translate it, what kinds of positive expectations do you have? And how sure, or in what ways are you sure they'll do that? How confident are you in your expectations? And how do these positive expectations affect your behavior? Because I have calculus-based trust in them, I act differently in these ways, right? What do you say, or what do you do or not do because you trust them to do what they say they will, right? How does it affect your actions, your strategy in a broader sense? And how does that make you feel emotionally? And how does that give you agency, right? So helping somebody to not only say, well, yes, here's the degree to which I have this kind of trust in them. They will do what they say, but then talking them through, how does having that trust affect who you are, how you feel, what you can or can't make happen, especially in this conflict, all right? And a similar kind of identity-based trust conversation, right? Which we won't belabor because we're 1 minute after 10. But luckily, we are at the end of what I wanted to talk about. Gottman has a good set of stuff, but not good enough to keep you over time. And we've already kind of talked about the issue of assessments and screening, although I would have loved to have had even more time. But that's really kind of where the thinking is. And again, don't want to do disservice or dishonor to all the great work on trust that is out there that we haven't acknowledged and brought into the conversation. But from your questions and comments, I will say, as much as I really believe this is an area of work that we all can share with each other, and it is profoundly important now, maybe in ways I've never actually felt before. So it's a personal twinge there. But that I'm really thankful for your contributions and your interactions in this. And I hope this is the very beginning of a series of conversations. So thank you. And thank you to Julie and to Marie and Nikki and Emily and Chloe for letting me go a couple of minutes late. I appreciate that.
Tricia, you have been monitoring the chat so brilliantly, but I'm sure there are more questions and comments. I don't know what your availability is for the next 10 minutes or so, if others want to contribute.
I would love to stay on to that conversation. I don't have to be anywhere until 10:30. So, and not that anyone needs to stay for another 27 minutes.
No, they don't need to stay, but our experience is that they often have more to say, and this is not a quiet group.
Yeah.
So anyone speak up if you have a question or a comment. You never know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I can't see across all of this, so I'll count on all you guys, good people, to just shout out or raise a hand, and then Julie and Nikki will.
My partner right here, who's been eavesdropping, John, has a question.
Yeah, all right, hi.
What's your question?
In your mediations and discussions, to what extent do you put stock in personal idiosyncrasies of the person that walks in the room, and you can almost tell right away that they had a bad night and that they're loaded for bear. I just was curious if that is part of your training. I had part of my business training in the United States Army as an investigator and analyst. And we dwelled on that to kind of make a judgment about what we were getting into as we started a mediation.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And I think that there's a lot of room to kind of take that idea, John. And, you know, one of my colleagues the other day we were talking about it, and she was like, you know, it's nice to kind of just take a trust temperature of where somebody is, right, at the very beginning of that conversation. And that you can do it in so many different ways. But I think it's a really good idea because, you know, I mean, I know for me personally, and you may feel the same way, if something's happened where I happen to be in, you know, a negative trust frame of mind for whatever, you know, recognizing that and thinking about how is that, am I ready for this conversation? Am I emotionally ready to have this conversation, or do I need to wait until later and I'm not that place anymore? Or, you know, how is that really affecting what kind of things I project onto the other person when I'm talking about them? So I like that idea of kind of taking a trust temperature. I also think trust conversations are difficult for people to have. So as in all conflict coaching stuff, and I'm looking at my friend Michael West, who does this maybe better than anyone I know on the face of the earth. Hi, Michael. I know you're there in the corner. I see you. You know, who does such a great job of you know, thinking about how important it is to be able to help somebody understand how safe this space is for any conversation they're going to have, right? And if you're going to talk trust, you need to show trust and that you are trustworthy to them. A lot of the chat comments earlier, people were sharing about how important that was, and to the Menti comments as well. So, John, I think that's a really important. I think you can blow it. Yeah, I think you can really blow it to push a trust conversation when somebody just is not ready.
Yeah,
are able to do that.
Thank you.
But everyone's ready to do it with Michael West because he's fantastic.
Well, I just unmuted for the first time. I've been so kindly to you mention. But one thing, you know, whether you're mediating or coaching, there's one thing I was always taught early on about being a mediator is we model what we want them to see. So we have to model trust and help them understand so they can trust not only me as a mediator, but trust the process. We've been talking a lot today about the trust between the two parties and the lack of it or the absence of it. But I always, when I'm coaching, I like to ask people, okay, where do you find it easier to trust people? At work or at home? and they'll give you an answer. Well, typically they say, well, it's at home. Why is it easier to trust people at home? And they'll give you some examples. And then my question would be, if you could duplicate those elements at work, what would that do? And see, it's that reflective piece and causes them to think, well, I could do this, I could do this. So what's keeping you from doing that? And get that mind going in that direction. And I wish that was original to me, but that's out of Crucial Conversations material on addressing safety and trust.
Thank you, Michael.
A lot of thank yous.
I have a question. I don't see an option for me to raise my hand. I'm sorry, I didn't do that. Hi, I'm Hyacinth. I come from a background of mental health and substance abuse rehabilitation, and I am interested in youth and the population you mentioned earlier. And when I came into contact with mediation and conflict coaching and conflict resolution in general, I really I said, wow, this is like the missing link in addiction treatment. And I was so excited. In my own attempt to sort of fill the gap in that space, I started thinking about how I could possibly intervene and bring this concept into, to that population. And listening to you today and particularly with the calculated trust and the identification trust, I think people could get into a lot of trouble with the identification. I think it's sort of innate that we identify with people and trust them just because they are similar and they are like us. And I think eventually we have to move to that calculated trust. Right. But one of the things that the question I want to ask you is what do you see as your primary motive in that population? And I'll just say what I felt. I felt that it was more important for people to be mindful, for people to learn basic mindfulness skills, prior to or in addition to the conflict resolution, conflict coaching kind of thing. All right, thanks.
Sure, thank you, Hyacinth. Yeah, thank you, Hyacinth. Yeah, and in your question in terms of kind of the populations that I'm working with, I'm not sure if you're kind of referring to the youth population.
Youth,
but yeah, okay, yeah. One of the things, and I don't want to take any credit for this because it's all their thinking, but, trust is in super low supply there, for all the right reasons, right? Because they're very intelligent on so many levels, and they understand why they have been trust impoverished for a very long time and by a number of people and institutions. So one of the conversations we've been having, which has really just grabbed me, and I'm just kind of following their wisdom, is the way that they are framing trust as agency. That if they choose to trust for their reasons and in their ways, how does that give them agency that they may not have thought about before? So, one of my good friends who's working with us has come from very much from a youth empowerment, and development kind of frame. Her background is from that. And so she kind of talks about it in terms of that. But for me, listening to these folks, it's all about starting conversations where they're talking about that their willingness to not trust and or their active use of distrust has cost them more than it has been worth, and that they see that any barriers are more likely to keep them in as opposed to keep somebody else out, and that they have narrowing their own avenues toward empowerment and agency. And so those conversations are ones that are most critical for me. And so I think, I will say, outside of dealing with conflict or dealing with a particular conflict, that's one of the, and I think mindfulness is a part of that very much, but I'm much attracted to this idea of agency, and they're seeing trust through an agency lens.
Others.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan.
I think we're going to stop the official recording now in case that motivates any other questions who would like to be off record. But I just wanted to echo Julie's and Maria's and all of our thanks for you joining. So I'm going to stop the recording now, but we can continue conversation until 1:30 PM.